All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this session of the Emerging Tech Community Roundtable. We're on show number 11. I'm excited to host today. My name is Shai Perednik. I'm a 28-year tech veteran, and I have some awesome panelists here with me. We're going to be digging into the jobs of the future, and thank you for joining today. As we jump into the session, it's important to remember that in today's rapidly evolving technology landscape, there's a convergence of emerging technology, blockchain, artificial intelligence, augmented virtual reality. We're seeing the integration of all these technologies, and it's really shaping the future of entrepreneurship, innovation, and social impact. On today's show, we're going to discuss how these technologies are leveraged systematically and symbiotically together to address empowering and entrepreneurship, societal challenges, and overall drive a positive change. As I said, I'm excited. We're joined by three distinguished guests. Each of them have a unique perspective on the future of work, technology, and the ever-evolving landscape of professional roles. First, Obi, thank you for joining us today. A visionary data strategist and AI solutions, Obi has a remarkable track record of empowering SMEs to accelerate growth through custom data strategies and is passionate about transforming visions into reality. With his extensive experience in both development and mentorship of startups with AI and data analytics, Obi brings a deep understanding of the future technology and its impact on business and innovation. Thank you, Obi, for joining us today. Next, I'll go over to Janelle. Thank you for joining us today. She's a futurist, entrepreneur, a designer who focuses on creating collaborative futures. She's trained as an architect and a city planner. Janelle's work revolves around evolving our understanding of future living spaces to rapidly transition towards socially and environmentally positive outcomes. Her involvement in projects like Your 2040 and her passion for planetary boundary cities, giving her unique insight into the roles and jobs that will emerge as we strive towards a sustainable and regenerative urban environments. Thank you again, Janelle, for joining us. Lastly, Richard, thank you for being patient here. We'll move on to Richard Marshall, joining us, bringing a wealth of knowledge from extensive careers spanning coding, corporate governance, strategy, product development, and as a former Gartner analyst, inventor, and expert witness with an unbroken record of success. Richard has a keen eye for the intersection of technology, law, and business strategy, and his insights into the software industry and his perspectives on technology as a futurist will undoubtedly shed light on the evolving tech landscape and emerging professional roles it necessitates. So together on today's show, these guests are going to help me explore the dynamics of the future job market, the impact on professional roles, and the skills necessary to navigate the changes on the horizon. Let's get right to it and dive in as we have an awesome discussion full of insights, predictions, and advice for many professionals aiming to future-proof their careers. The format of today's show is going to go with we have about 6 questions. We're going to take about 8 to 10 minutes to answer the first question, and then we're going to jump into each of our speakers and give them an opportunity to really dive into their background, their perspectives. We'll wrap up with about 2 questions at the end, and we'll leave about 10 minutes for open questions for our audience. Again, thank you all for joining us, my panelists. I'm excited to be here with you. Let's jump into the first question, and Obi, I'm gonna start with you, and then we'll do about a 2-minute lightning round for you, and then we'll move on to the rest here. So, could each of you share an initiative that you're currently involved in that really excites you the most? What problems or challenges are you aiming to solve, and what opportunities do you foresee emerging? Obi, can you kick us off here?
Thanks, Shai. Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for inviting me to be on the program today. It's a pleasure to be amongst people that eager to navigate the AI and technology landscape. What am I working on now? It's basically in 2 parts. One is commercial, an AI tool that enables non-technical managers or founders or startups to derive insights from charts or dashboards in general. My years of experience in data and analytics has shown this gap between these developers and techies and the business itself. So it makes the business managers to struggle to understand and increase the workload of the developer because they keep explaining what the charts, after doing their work, they have to explain what the charts are saying to the managers and all that. So we're trying to develop something, but more than that, my most interesting project is the one very important to me personally is the work we're doing in Africa. So we're trying to raise awareness and increase the use of emerging technologies. Doing this by increasing the skill set, competencies for youth and everyone, career-wise or in business. Generally improving innovative mindset, And I said Africa, but I run a small charity as well in the UK that do the same for Black and ethnic minority in the UK. And generally people that cannot afford the high cost of training in those aspects. So everyone is taking care of what we're trying to do. So back to Africa, we are building something great. More African youths in career or business who will be much aware of the emerging technologies. We nurture them via training and coaching and mentoring and measure their level of commitment to take them to the next level, and then create some form of pathway or framework to better opportunities across the continent. So we're working with some organizations. So one in America, still under conversation to provide AI certification courses in Nigeria at very minimal cost. Cost is a massive factor to penetrating the continent. So we're trying everything to do to provide something affordable, if possible, free of charge to people that needs it. And so more than that, we offer online training for entrepreneurs, startups, small businesses. I was one part of a foundation that started incubation, but it's just for 12 months program. And they give them seed fund and they start on their own. And I've over the years realized that it's not enough for those startups at that early stages. They still need someone to at least next 3-4 years to help them. So we're trying to educate and increase people's knowledge of incubation best practices. So more people will start something like that and help those small businesses and startups to make it sustainable at the long run.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Obi, thank you very much for the detail in your background there. I think that's a very, awesome, noble and humble cause of you, right? To work on that. That's an awesome opportunity. Lots of innovators out there, and we need passionate people like you out there that are aiming to teach and educate, move that forward. So thank you for the noble work that you do. That's very honorable of you. Janelle, you're next on my list here, so I'm going to jump to you. Can you share some of your projects, initiatives that you're working on? We'd love to hear more from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. Sorry, I have a giant dog that just decided to come in the room. Apologies. The project that I'll talk about today is called Your 2040, and it's an organization that I co-founded. And our ambition is really to help promote positive futures globally. And what we're currently working on is, I don't know if I guess I'd frame it as the problem of dystopian thinking and dystopian futures. And, each of us every day have one of these things nearby, and reading the news, digging into that very quickly can have many of us spiral into, negative thinking. And we quickly end up in these places where we think, oh, the world's ending and humanity's over and, we're all gonna be gone in 5 years. But most likely we will not, and most likely we will continue to, survive and thrive on this planet. And so we're really bringing people together to explore, create these positive, plausible narratives for the future to help shift the thinking around. And we specifically are focusing on the future because it's a place where we can all kind of cohabitate. It's far enough away that we can work together to use both data to understand what's happening, but also a bit of our imagination to shape where we want it to go. Yeah.
Well, Janelle, thank you for the introduction. What rang home really for me is that you're a beacon of hope and light in a world of doom and gloom when we look at the media, right? That's a very common thing that we see. And I love the positivity and energy that you're bringing here, because it's true. The world will be awesome. And we're going to see a lot more awesome things, and we need a lot more ambassadors like you sharing that awesome sauce of the world. So thank you for doing the work that you do as well. Richard, I'm going to jump to you next. I want to hear some of the initiative projects that you're working on today, some of the problems and challenges that you're aiming to solve, and then we'll wrap up this initial lightning round. We'll move on to our deep questions.
Okay, so, I am working on a couple of expert witness legal cases, which I am not allowed to talk about because they're confidential. But in between that, I am working on some stuff which is very similar to the gap that Obi was talking about, but except I'm kind of approaching it from the people who are stuck in the past rather than the people trying to build the future. So one of the groups of people that I feel are problematic about us reaching the optimistic future are board directors, people like me, old white men who are disconnected from the modern world. I don't include myself in that group, well, even though I am an older white man. The problem is that a lot of board level people or people at the ends of their careers have found out that, they think that the three skills that they need in order to be a board level person is playing golf, understanding a bit of law, and being an accountant. And it's almost a badge of honor to not understand things like AI and technology. That's for little people. So one of the things that I'm working on is attempting to create material that will help those people understand why it's essential that they look into AI in particular, but that they can understand how to address business problems and use the new technology to solve those business problems. So it's connecting the people with the technology solutions with the people who've got the need, because they don't understand each other, again, which is, picking up on Obi's point there. And hopefully that will lead to a lot of existing businesses not going out of business, but transforming themselves and being able to support a better future and look after the staff within their organizations and, of course, their customers.
Cool, Richard. Thank you for that intro. I think again, what stood out to me there is that there's still a lot of decision makers at the board level that still need this information. They need the details, and I like to call it you call it the badge of wearing that badge of not knowing, almost, right? To me, it's a hat. I call it the hat of ignorance. It's their ability to not willingly look the other way just because they didn't know something. So I think that's changing, right? I think a lot of boards are seeing that they can no longer wear this hat, and kudos to you for being on the front lines there and fighting the good fight and helping the board levels understand the depth there. So thank you for your work. Obi, we've finished up the initial lightning round, so I want to come to you. You talked about Africa and the content there, and I'm sure you're doing a lot of awesome work, and I'm going to give you a little more time here. So you have an extensive expertise, from what I read, in really fostering growth for subject matter experts. That's what we call SMEs. From what I read, you really focus on customer data strategies. You spend a lot of time in your role mentoring AI and data and analytics startups, and you've been at the forefront of technology innovation for quite some time now. Considering all those contributions that you've made in the past and the things that you're working on today, what do you think that we can work on when it comes to developing future talents and leaders in technology? And particularly, I'd like to hone in on what are those emerging skills and the interdisciplinary areas that you believe are crucial for professionals that are navigating this new landscape.
Thank you once again, Shai. Yeah, it's very important question and good one. And that I would like to break it down a bit into two key aspects. You mentioned emergent skills and then the interdisciplinary area. So looking at that in that way, skills that are coming. I will start with data. Data skills, data literacy. I've been talking about this for some time now. In 2017-18, I was opportune to contribute to a book for the BCS, British Computer Society, about data analysis. And I mentioned that in 5 years' time, that data literacy will be like someone knowing how to use Microsoft Office in a workplace. So somehow, everybody must need to know how to use data in at different levels in one way or the other, and it's coming to play. So I think the first thing is data literacy, and data is the bedrock, is the backbone of all the technologies, be it AI, blockchain, drones, and all that. So ability to read, understand, and create some form of communication with data as information is very key. And I think everybody should be looking towards that, much like in the early education and all that. Data literacy is becoming a fundamental skill across all level of organization. That it's not sector based or techie people anymore. It just depends on the level you want to get get involved. Another skill, I know people worry AI is taking over our job, but I think there's lots of information out there that's found out not to be true. Even when the AI is doing most of the work, they can still do it appropriately. They still need human beings to look at it. So critical thinking and problem solving skills is very key as well. Those are part of the skills that are required in going into AI era. The ability to critically assess these systems, this AI system, different systems, understand their limitations, and creatively solve problems they can't solve. Yeah, will be invaluable. And then ethics as well, ethics and governance of both data and AI, making sure the right things are done, including bias or fairness and privacy, things like that. Professionals I think professionals must be able to navigate all these complex issues. It's about training and getting people aligned to what is required. Then further down is the machine learning and understanding AI, which may be for the techies or people that are into those kind of development in general. Well, communication has been key point in everything we do from years back to tomorrow. No matter what you're doing, how your skills, if you're unable to communicate, tell people, explain it at level, depending on who you're talking to. So it's not going to be useful. Nobody can understand you. So it's key. And this is where data visualization and storytelling with data comes into play. As a data analyst, I might be biased there. So, so that's where the visualization of data and storytelling with data comes to one of the major areas of my specialization, and one of the biggest model in a course I deliver to organization. Storytelling with data, visualization comes under communication, which is very much central. So looking at the interdisciplinary area, I think this
You covered a lot there, Obi. Let me if it's okay, I want
Okay.
to dissect a couple of things here because I want to give the panelists an opportunity to jump in because you shared a lot of really cool information, and particularly I will jump in with one question and then I'll hand it over to the panelists here, right? You work a lot with subject matter experts, and you call that critical thinking and problem solving, right? In the traditional days, that meant Googling, searching, reading documents, putting all things together, making notes, and figuring stuff out on your own because you didn't have AI tools to do that for you. I'm curious now that we're seeing a lot of reasoning, and we hear a lot about the ability of a language model to do reasoning. What advice do you have for subject matter experts to continue honing in their Googling and reasoning skills, given that AI is doing some of that reasoning for them?
Well, it's going back to basic understanding the concept. So assuming you're a subject matter expert, you're trying to design a project or experiment in data analytics again. And what you need to understand all the techniques in data like regression, clustering, classification. What do they mean? How did they solve business problems? I mean, AI can do that, but you need to tell AI what to do. And when they bring out the output, you need to be able to interpret or understand what they've done so that you know when it's right and when it's wrong. So it's basically making sure people understand the concept behind the principle behind what they're doing, rather than just sitting and waiting for AI to do all that. But AI cannot do it, do everything. That's limitation. That's part of the limitation, and ethics as covered under AI.
Yeah, good call out there, Obi. Oh yeah, I definitely cannot do everything. Janelle and Richard, I want to give you guys an opportunity. Janelle, do you want to jump in first there?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Obi. It's always nice to hear different, perspectives, and I don't work with a lot of people who do what you do, so that's always exciting. And I also just really love that some of the points you mentioned were things like communications and critical thinking, because I think those are valuable for both this and almost any profession. If you're good at communications, you can do many things. Anyhow, you said specifically with tech, with the fact that we're going to continue to need humans involved. I think personally is like a very positive narrative also, because I've experienced many people being a little bit scared of that. I suppose the question would be around if you have any tips for people who are just getting into this kind of area, where they might start, or what's the first thing to look into better understand what, I don't know, data or tech area for their profession.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's with regards to data literacy, it's a kind of a soft course. That's a program I call No Code Data and AI program. It's mainly understanding the concepts of different techniques to analysis, and then being able to have the information or the concept behind visualization, what it means and what you're looking at, what's telling you. So that's lots of materials out there for people starting. If you're in the UK, that's what they call boot camps. The government is sponsoring it, so it's free of charge to everyone, regardless of, as long as you're aged 18 and above, you can go on boot camp, and it has different courses, data analytics, business analysis, AI, anything you can think of. And more than that, there's apprenticeships, does the same. Difference is that in apprenticeship, you can be earning while doing apprenticeship, and there's data level 1, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 7, which is master's degree, and you will be employed. So I think people doesn't necessarily, that's the university aspect of it, but because I work in apprenticeship and all those kind of further education, I prefer to talk about them, where you earn money and actually do some practical work of what you're learning, not just going through that academics and going back to start garden experience, doing both at the same time. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Obi, thank you very much for that detail here. I want to just keep moving things along. Richard, I know you had a comment, so I'll give you about 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Well, I think the
Thank you.
critical thinking thing is, well, critical. One of the abilities that's one of the things I actually spend quite a lot of time talking to people about is identifying something that is hype or something that is a genuine trend. And I think that's something that we really need to educate to be able to make that kind of decision. Should I be making a strategic bet on a technology, or is it going to vanish in a few months' time? And that's getting harder and harder because there's so many more layers of technology.
Yeah, no, that's a good point there, Richard. Well, let's jump into that and let's segue a little bit, right? So you have extensive experience, particularly in the software industry, working with various different technologists in this, specifically in software development, from strategy to governance. You also have insights from your former roles as Gartner analyst and a technology futurist. Can you talk a little about the roles that you foresee coming in the future, and particularly the essential business skills and the need to the broader economy?
Well, I think the whole concept of the T-shaped person is very important. It doesn't have to be T-shaped, it can be here, because there are, as I just said, so many layers of technology there. And I think it's really important for people to be aware of that stack of technologies that a business is built on. And that includes technology as well. It's not just about, business. It's not just about the technology. It's about understanding how your business is organized. And you need to have a speciality where you have that depth of knowledge that you can make propositions, but you also need to be able to assess them. So a lot of that is actually about joining the dots, we could say. It's about understanding where the technology will give your business an advantage. And as a technologist, it's about understanding how business works and how that you can apply what you're building to that. One of the things that has come up a lot in the past is this concept of the novice versus the expert, and the novice being able to see solutions that are out there that the expert can't see because they're in a groove. I don't think the analogy works perfectly, but it's an interesting idea. And one of the things I've seen is people talking about using AI as that novice, because the AI doesn't have the experience of delivering something. It just comes up with ideas which may all be nonsense, but it may come up with some interesting things. So the skill is to be able to take the knowledge of that stack, see where we can optimize things, and understand how we tell that story with a level of detail in the area where you're the specialist, but also to have quite a broad general understanding of how that's going to fit in, and the ability to look beyond the way we've always done this. Now that was a very complicated description, and I'm not sure how you could wrap that up quickly and teach people the skills, but it's actually a very interesting thing that we all need to learn, because go back to Obi's point about the data being a language that everybody needs to be able to speak, just like almost everybody can use Microsoft Office today. And it's that notion that we can take the ability to implement processes in technology or manually or however, and assess how well we're doing with them. And that is something that is extremely difficult to teach, because it's a core skill, and it's absolutely not in the sort of checkbox of here's a skill that unfortunately education has been forced down. I come from a family of educators, and my father was a teacher. One of my daughters is a teacher. So my brother was a university lecturer until he retired recently. So understanding that process, that they are boxed in increasingly, that doesn't help us. We need to be able to provide resources that help people jump out of that box and identify the adjacent areas to jump over that gap. So that's not an easy set of skills to talk about. Appreciate that was kind of running around. It's interesting if we look at Janelle's background with architecture, planning, etc. And now here we are talking about work-related topics. These things are intimately related, but you wouldn't think that in the traditional siloed educational system.
Yeah, no, good points there. Richard, thank you for the detail. Janelle, I see a lot of positive sentiment or feedback from you as well. Do you want to add on to here and some of the cool stuff that Richard's saying, particularly about jumping out of the box?
Sure. Also, I just completely agree. And I spent about 8 years working inside of a corporate engineering firm, which was really awesome. But watching them transition and try to integrate kind of this data literacy, AI, machine learning, all of these kind of tech into the industry was fascinating for many reasons. But this divide that you're talking about, both in education and partially in practice, I hope that it will close with time. But you know, inside of the company, it was a company of engineers, and you start bringing in tech engineers, which are different than building design engineers, and you get this tension. And I am not either of these two. I was the observer of it, but it was fascinating just because I would be in the room trying to help everybody talk with one another. And you know, from the start point of the outsider, you think, oh well, you guys should be able to talk, but the language is so different.
Yeah.
Yep. Correct. Obi or Richard, you want to comment on that language and the divide there?
Yeah.
I think it takes us back to, sorry, I'll do just a very quick one. I think it takes us back to storytelling. It's more about that story has to be communicated in a way that it doesn't rely on technical jargon.
Yeah.
And most industries have developed jargon. It's just because it's quicker and easier, but it internally, but it doesn't help that external thing. And there's a huge pressure to use what I would call consultant speak, to use long words when you can get a much better story with short ones.
Yeah, Obi?
Yeah, I just want to add that, and the goal of that coming out of that box isn't to become an expert in everything, but it is to cultivate a versatile skill set that allows you to communicate effectively across disciplines, and and think critically about the impact of technology and AI applications and the ethics in more innovative ways. That's one of the, just, it's not just, so everybody will know everything, but it just being free to communicate and easier communication in that sense.
Yeah, that's a good,
Also-
oh, sorry, John, go ahead, please. You want to talk about?
To chime in again, sorry guys.
Yeah.
But for me, a lot of the future and workplace is about all of the things we're talking about, but also collaboration. And,
Exactly.
at least from the world I sit in, I'm seeing that increase in my own career from when I started till now. But it's a lot of what both of you are talking about, communication. And if we can communicate in a way that one another understands, so, removing the jargon, or at least explaining it if you say it, is a good start point. But also what Richard was saying is just getting, people in the room that are just different and
Yeah.
figuring it out.
Richard, you want to comment on the diverse perspectives, and then we'll wrap up this one, move on to the next one?
I think the point about people being different is very interesting, and it's one of the biggest blockers of that is lack of trust, and people who are manipulative have a tendency to think other people are being manipulative, and unfortunately the workplace has a lot of toxic people in it. And one of the things is you need to have management that will get rid of those toxic people so that you can have those trusted conversations, and then that's where the communication will build. And people have to be honest as well. It's not just about trust. They've got to tell the true story, not the story that they think other people want to hear.
Yeah, that's a good point to tell the honest truth. Thanks, Richard. I'll wrap up this segment with the thought that comes to my mind is that in the future, when I think about Gen Alpha and I think about Star Trek, I think almost that we'll need a universal communicator for some of the Gen Alpha who want to speak in their own language and their own terminology and just don't know how to communicate because they've been doing this all the time and on their phones. And so I find it interesting that we may have these kind of AI devices that help people just communicate with each other because they just haven't learned those communication skills as we're seeing in some of the youth today. So I think going back to a little bit what Obi was saying in his original comment there, it's kind of really about being truth to the ground and really understanding what it is that you're trying to do and learning that language and developing that reasoning skills and those communication skills. So thank you all for sharing your feedback. Definitely some good perspectives there. Janelle, I'm going to jump to you next. I have a question here I want to ask you and dig into a little bit your background. You've been pioneering work with regenerative and planetary boundary cities for quite some time now. You're shaping the blueprint of some of the futures of urban environments that really prioritize sustainability and environmental regeneration. This is really a transformative vision that's new to professionals like myself and many others, right? So do you anticipate emerging, and how might these existing roles adapt to support the sustainable and interconnected systems of these future urban environments?
Thank you. Not a nice, simple question. I guess I'm gonna go on a little story for a second, but
Please.
when I start thinking about the future and the future of work specifically, one of the first things I think about is the past. And if you have met any futurists or have done any futures work, the key to all of it is really you need understanding the past. And the better you understand the past and the trends and how we got to where we are, the more accurate you're going to be looking to where we're going. Right. We can never predict 100% the future, but we can get lots of indicators and guidance on kind of what's likely to happen. I say that because if we looked back, specifically in kind of the tech, AI, maybe professional areas, I don't know. But if we look back to 1900 or even 1950, how many of us have jobs that they could have ever imagined existed today? I would say very, very few, right? Like, they didn't imagine we were walking around the cities with these things. There's a few creative science fiction people maybe who did, but the general population did not foresee that, or that I can communicate with you guys. We're in 3 different locations around the world, right? Like even just like that level of detail. And so then if we start looking at our jobs, right, and the way that those have shifted from what people did 50 to 100 years ago to today, like there's a huge I don't know what the word is, innovation, upskilling, like just transformation of what we do. And there are still jobs that have existed for thousands of years, right? And so some things will remain. They might be, like we still have farming. As long as humans need to eat, we're going to have to figure out some way to farm and create food. It might transition how it looks, but like that will always be a role that needs to be delivered in some capacity, for example. Now, then transitioning a little bit from, I'm saying that because when we look at the future, right, the first piece is going to be, it's hard to say what, 100% what will be shifting and changing in the next 20 to 50 years or what kind of jobs we might have, but I can guarantee you that whatever we're doing in 20 years from now is going to be things that we didn't even envision today.
What do you,
And
go ahead.
no, I was just going to keep going, but you
Yeah,
can
no,
jump in.
I wanted to keep going because I'd love to hear from your perspectives and the things that you're seeing today in the customers and clients that you work with in your field. What are you seeing today as some of those new and emerging roles that maybe weren't there 5 years ago?
Yeah, so specifically in like, I'd say architecture, city planning, engineering, the built environment sector. Well, kind of two things. For me, this is like where many different professions all meet because there's two things that happen in parallel. There's the people that create the physical environments we live in, and then there's everyone else who inhabits them, right? And you have to be thinking of both while you're creating a building or an infrastructure or a whatever it is. And I think probably the two biggest trends are maybe similar to what you all see, which are tech and, it's a very broad spectrum of AI, machine learning, digital technologies, all these things, but also sustainability. And they're both at the moment taking these kind of parallel tracks where there's not a lot of integration yet. There are some people at the fringes that are finding ways to use tech to help deliver sustainability. But a lot of the discussions that I've seen and have been in, and even with clients, when they're asking you questions, it's either this or this. It's rarely where they both come together. So I think one opportunity area would be that, figuring out how do we use tech to help deliver more sustainable options? Because, humans only have so much capacity in our brains. The computer essentially expands our brain and lets us connect to all these other people and upskill all of that. So I say that because, when you essentially sustainability, climate, all of these things need very rapid kind of thinking and innovation and figuring out how do we actually do something. And if the last 20 years, we haven't done a lot of that. So I'm hoping that AI will help us kind of facilitate, not just AI, but the whole kind of tech industry will help facilitate some of that. But also, and some maybe kind of simpler things, I think of it as three. There's urban, and then there's regenerative, and I'm separating them slightly because there's things like cities, specifically in the global north, because that's more of where I focus at the moment. The majority of all of our cities need to be retrofit. Everything from redoing the roadways to changing the lights to creating new infrastructure. In the US, we just had a big bridge fall down, and rethinking how are we going to be doing that and how can we recreate it, rebuild it, retrofit it in a new way, and that's better. And so there's a lot of aging infrastructure. So essentially my point is, and retrofitting cities, there are tons and tons of cities, and is a ton of work to be doing. So at its very core, that's ripe for innovation and figuring out how can we do this, how can we scale it up, how can we do it faster. And that's a multiple level of jobs, from design to engineering and solutioning to actually building it, right? People on the ground that maybe don't have or need tech skills, not sure,
So I'm
and
curious.
regeneration.
Sorry, I apologize.
Last point. Last point. The sort of regeneration and sustainability is very, very similar in the sense of, it's all over. We talk about it all of the time, at least in my kind of world. And I just see tons of opportunities for green economy. What does a green city look like? What does green energy look like that actually works? What does can we make solar powered cars? Just how do we actually implement all of these sustainable solutions? Very few of them have answers at the moment, which means there's lots of opportunity for us to be finding solutions and building them. Okay.
Yeah, and so I want to dig into that a bit, and Obi or Richard, I apologize for jumping in here, but I'm curious specifically about college students, right? So you bring a really unique perspective, and we have a lot of a demographic of good college and university students that are going to be looking at your expertise here and be saying, okay, there's so many things I can do. what would in about 30 to 60 seconds, what advice would you give a college or university student that says, I want to be innovative, I want to be an innovator in this space, right? What direction would you suggest that they go look at? And we can assume, an urban and typical university degree.
Two things. One, find the thing that you're passionate about, if possible. I'm saying that because if you are passionate about whatever you do, you will go 10 times farther than if you're not. Not everyone has a thing they're passionate about, and that's okay. But if you are, do that thing. Second would be find a way to merge sustainability and tech. Like take both classes, and I don't have an answer to that, but like I would say take the courses. Your professors are going to know. There's people in practice that have these hard problems, but it'd be getting an education where you know a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, definitely the sustainability and tech. That's the big part of the future there. Richard, Obi, any comments before we move on to some of the next lightning rounds? And Janelle, thank you for the detail there.
Thank you. I think I agree with Janelle. And there's been lots of discussions around that people in colleges now will come out to roles that are not yet created. And that's a bit scary because how do you know what the roles will look like by the time they come out, and what exactly are they supposed to be training in? And just answered it now. You're just being open to learning, continuous learning, being out there, like this kind of conversations, searching for materials out there that will not just in schools, but lots of internet has made it possible for people to have lots of resources out there. So it's difficult to pinpoint what's gonna be finally in the next 5 years, but there's some indicators that can direct one if they search, if they really, really are committed to it and looking. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Obi, for adding the detail. Richard?
Well, I think that one of the things is transferable skills, and that takes us back to critical thinking. One of my particular issues is the fact that we're still building offices that nobody wants to go and work in. And a lot of these new offices are actually going to be occupied by people who've moved out of old offices that do not meet modern environmental standards. So what are we going to do with them? And if you look at New York, it's at about 40% occupancy. European cities tend to be a little bit higher, 60, 70%. But these buildings are really difficult to convert into something that's usable. So it's very difficult to take the floor plate of an office and turn it into apartments, for example, which is a big shame because we have a huge homelessness problem and a huge lack of housing availability. So if I was looking at the graduating in 2 or 3 years, I would be looking at how do I find the solutions to solve these problems. And picking up on the idea of solar powered cars, the problem is energy density. And I remember when I was a student millions of years ago, we had a thing up the road from our computer lab, which was a wave tank where they were testing tidal energy. And tidal energy only now is kind of something that we're deploying. These things take a very, very long time to establish because there's so many problems with them. And energy density is another area that is really difficult to even understand. And where I don't think we're necessarily teaching these things, because it'd be really nice to do, as a techie, more understanding of applications. So when I was learning computer science all those millions of years ago, it was all about operating systems and hardware and building computers and building the underpinnings of everything else. But what we really need to be learning is how do we apply that across multiple scientific areas without necessarily learning those areas, but learning how to learn. And I think that that's definitely what I would be doing and what I would be recommending to people.
Yeah, good point there, Richard. Go ahead, Janelle.
Throw in 2 more things. Sorry. Listening to you guys both talk, specifically what Richard said on offices is like, this is a big challenge in, both the US and Europe, and probably other countries too. But, you could be studying, like that is a policy. There's many ways. It's like we usually look at retrofitting the office to housing as a design challenge, but it's also a policy challenge. And because that's the reason we can't implement it isn't because we can't design it, it's because the policies don't allow us to. So like that's one thing if you're a student, policy, getting into built environment, or whatever you want to call it, policy is a huge opportunity area where you can really shift the design of a whole city. And my thing is still retrofit because that's going to be key. And so policy is critical for that. Also figuring out materials, I'd say. If you're into materials, like figuring out what new materials, because things like concrete are running out in the world, right? And most of our cities right now are built with huge amounts of concrete. So, what other materials can we be testing today so that we can be implementing them in the next 10 years?
So Janelle, I'm actually gonna go off that one as a segue into our next section here, because you're talking really about the problems and the challenges that we're seeing in this area, right? Whether regulatory, social, labor, educational, sometimes it's perceptional issues, right? You've all, I think, encountered these challenges, and I want to go in on that one specifically, Janelle. Can you elaborate more on what you and your peers and your colleagues today are doing to address some of those challenges? You mentioned policy, and that's one. Can you talk about some more? And I'll give you about 2 minutes.
Sure. So I think maybe the challenges, there's always a number of challenges, and that for me is exciting. So if you're also a student or anyone, if you can fall in love with the challenge, I think it's always an exciting thing because you find solutions for it. Maybe a quick few. So things like regulatory are a bit of or policies are a bit of what we were talking about. There's kind of two challenges today. There's the constantly evolving landscape, because things on the ground are changing so much that policymakers don't always know which thing. It's like what Richard mentioned earlier, hype versus trend. That's, I think, also a big challenge. And so as a practitioner, the fact that the policies and the regulations are always changing make it difficult. But also they often hinder what is possible to do. So I'm just repeating what we said earlier, but like with the office buildings, like that's a super easy thing we could do. Building wise, like physically, we could retrofit these offices, very simple. But there's a number of other reasons why that is not possible right now. And they're typically tied to policy, some of which are good, some of which are not. Like light and air requirement is a thing. So if you're going to design a building, for example, you have to have so much fresh air that can come into a room. Right. And that's good because we want that for our health and well-being. But when we have a huge stock of buildings that we could be retrofitting that maybe don't meet that, I think there's questions around what new types of policies or design solutions could we be doing or implementing that addresses both.
Yeah, no, thank you, Janelle. That's some good detail there. Obi, I'm going to go to you next because we had some good conversations early to start there, and some of the experiences that you've gone through in the past. Can you talk about some of those pressing challenges that you see, the regulatory, social, labor, education, and perception, and talk about some things that you and your peers are doing to address those?
Okay. Yeah, I think with regards to data, I see scarcity of talent as a challenge because of the increase in demand of data skills. So finding the individual with that requisite skills in data, especially demand, as I said, demand outpaces the supply. It's going to be an issue for organizations in general, and add to that retention. that directly affects how to retain them after onboarding and all that, because of the competition out there in the market, and then the how do you align this project, these data techies or data skills to business objectives? That's another complex issue organizations are struggling with. And with regards to how to deal with all those kind of challenges, I think it's about the strategy, or rather than tactics. Management should focus on good planning from word go, identify the right model for your talent, identifying talent and keeping them, and then make sure it's executable and ways of monitoring that, and then avoiding all the loopholes and pitfalls in managing those kind of strategies in business in general. So one of the main challenges I'm seeing with regards to the future technologies is talent. Because very few, I suspect very few will catch on this whole conversations to be ready for that future we're all discussing. And I think businesses should, do a lot to be at forefront and get the right people in the right places.
Well, but thank you for the detail. Richard, you've had the pleasure of sitting back and listening to Janelle and Obi kind of summarize their perspective there. So I'm going to give you the third hot seat there. Can you add some details from your experience?
I think that there's curiosity and is a major thing. Is that unfortunately there's large forces out there trying to kill off people's curiosity. I think curiosity is super important, and we need to be encouraging people to be curious about everything. Part of that's actually encouraging people to be more playful, including the adults. So one of the problems with most Western urban environments is that play spaces have been crushed out of them. And this is not just for kids, but it's for adults as well. Adults need to play. It's very important, and there's a lot of strong psychological behavior behind it. And that the combination of curiosity and play actually helps people understand solutions, and it's getting out of that groove. It's looking for new ways of dealing with things, and it doesn't matter actually what you're doing. It doesn't matter whether you're sweeping the streets or whether you're making executive decisions. You still need to have that curiosity and that sense of playfulness around it, and that these are things that we need to bring back into society. And there's ways of doing it, but we need to be applying it and spending money on it, because the return on investment is absolutely enormous.
Yeah, that's definitely good details there. Thank you. Any comments from the rest of the panelists before we move on to our last and final question? All right. We have about 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure that I entertain any questions from the audience as well. So I just want to give you all a quick 60 seconds here to wrap us up, right? Think about the audience and the people that we have, right? We have diverse experiences from engineers all the way to executives listening to these sessions. We heard about adaptability, playfulness, right? Changing environments, all these great things. And it's certainly a lot to go through in this almost hour conversation that we've had. In the last 60 seconds for each of you, and Janelle, I'll start with you. What are some of the practical recommendations that you'd give to individuals, organizations that are looking to adapt and remain innovative in this space, really focused on the convergence of AI, blockchain, and machine learning and virtual reality? Can you talk about that in, again, 60 seconds, and then we'll wrap up this lightning round?
And I guess from my perspective, it's a lot less about the technical skills, because any of us can learn those, take a class, meet some people, whatever. It's a lot more about supporting your teams and the people that you work with, creating these environments of trust. If you have a team of people who all trust each other and trust the organization, you will go very far, right? And I think maybe the other two would just be investing in innovation. Like, even if it's 5-10% of your profit share or your company, like just this little bit will both create passionate people and ensure that you stay towards the forefront of your industry. And I think last is just collaborate. It's not easy. I know it's hard. It's hard talking to people that have completely different backgrounds sometimes, but if you can figure out how to do that, change will come.
I'm curious, so would you say if you focused on building that culture of trust, those other two will kind of come naturally along with it? And that's really the spearhead, is building that culture of trust?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, no, I definitely I share that perspective as well. Obi, I want to open up the floor to you, and then Richard will wrap up with you as well.
I think Jana just took those out of my mouth, and I totally agree with her. But I'll add that active work to eliminate biases in the hiring process, in training, and all that. Just creating an environment where values diverse perspectives, supports people from various backgrounds. This kind of involve partnership with organizations, that support underrepresented groups in the tech field. Okay, I have a friend that does that great work. They call BDPM in data profession. They're doing massive work to help people to get into work, or if you're into work already, help to direct other people that are trying to get into the same field, and speak to employers, help them with all those bottleneck or breaches they may have in reaching the right people in those communities, and also look into internal policies that promote inclusivity. I think is very key as well. So it's all about strategy. I love strategy, have a good strategy and make sure they're being implemented the right way, and doing so with the addition of a trust and collaboration that Jonelle took from my mouth. We better position we better position ourselves to attract and sustain the right talent necessary to support a data-driven, I know I go back to data all the time, data-driven objectives, and be future-proof in workplaces. Yeah.
Thank you, Obi. Richard, I'm going to give you the pleasure of following up here. Lots of good details here, and then I'd like to see what else is in your mind here.
Well, I'm just thinking, what else is there to say? Because I agree with all of that. And I think one of the major things that we need to do is get rid of the culture of management, because the culture of management is, as an objective, is extremely negative. So somebody going into a career thinking, I want to become a Mr. Manager, right? And what do managers do? They organize other people. They don't actually do the work. So what we really need to do is reorganize the way that we manage teams. And there's various names for this approach. We always used to call it, when we were building mobile apps, like the movie model, where you have multidisciplinary teams where everybody is pretty much equal within that, and there's no one person sitting over them cracking the whip. And that gives people the opportunity to look forwards, to be engaged, to own something rather than just being a drone. And that is going to require an absolutely enormous cultural change, because we are instilling everybody through all of the media and everything else this desire that being a manager is important. And it's not. It's about contributing that's important.
Cool, but Richard, I think that's a great note to end it on, and you wrapped us all very nicely. Contribution is a great way to contribute to the future, right? You've all done a wonderful and fantastic job contributing to that innovation in the future in the short hour alone, from the impact that this will have on the many of the listeners that we have. So I want to thank you all for the wise words. I've certainly had the pleasure and joy of hearing you all and processing this information. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to have you on board. Thank you for coming and sharing your perspectives today. Our audience certainly appreciates your insights, and you'll make impact for decades and centuries to come. So thank you all. I'll go ahead and close out the session for today. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to our panelists. Everybody take care, enjoy the day, and go create a new job role in your company. See you, everybody.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.